The clock showed 11:47 p.m. The Oval Office was bathed in the soft light of desk lamps, but the atmosphere in the room was tense, like before a thunderstorm. At the long table sat his closest team, lawyers, strategists, media people. They all knew that this briefing would not be ordinary. Donald Trump entered the room with a sharp movement, like a general entering headquarters before a decisive battle. His tie was loosened and his hair was disheveled, a rare occurrence. His eyes were blazing with anger. "This is fraud. This is theft," he exploded, slamming his palm on the table so that Miller's glass of water almost tipped over. "And who the hell is to blame for this?" Everyone looked at each other. Tell the truth? Bluff? Avoid a direct answer? A dead silence hung in the room. "Mike." Trump pointed a finger at Pence, who was sitting a little further away, facing away from the pressure. "You should have stopped this. You should have just said, no, and that was it. Why did you set me up?" Pence adjusted his tie, swallowed nervously, and looked at his advisers before answering. "Mr. President, the Constitution." "The Constitution?" Trump twisted his face. "This book of toilet paper? Do you understand that I am the boss here? You should stop it." He slammed his fist on the table. The lawyers shifted nervously. Giuliani cleared his throat and, wiping sweat from his forehead, whispered, "Donald, we can still fight. Lawsuits, protests, a media campaign." Trump turned to him slowly, like a predator. "We can't, Rudy. We will." His voice became cold and hard. "I want courts in every state where we lost. I want people to take to the streets. I want Fox News to finally work for me, not for these slobs. I want chaos. They stole the election, and they're going to regret it." A tense silence fell at the table. No one wanted to speak first. "What are we doing standing around like vegetables? Let's get to work," Trump thundered. The room was buzzing with voices, papers, and urgent calls. Outside the window, journalists' cameras were flashing, and in the White House itself, a plan was being hatched that would turn the entire country upside down. The room was in chaos. Someone was feverishly typing messages on their phones, lawyers were flipping through folders with already prepared lawsuits, and advisors were whispering among themselves, trying to figure out whether Trump really seriously intended to start chaos. Standing in the middle of the room, Trump moved like a general before a battle. He walked along the table, stopping abruptly in front of Mark Meadows, his then chief of staff. "Mark, what about the National Guard?" he asked sharply. Meadows blinked. "The National Guard?" "Yes, Mark. I'm asking if they're ready to restore order if our people take to the streets. We need to protect democracy, after all." Meadows swallowed nervously, but nodded. "We can check who supports us in military circles." "Okay. Do it." "And now." In the corner, Giuliani was whispering something feverishly to his lawyers, waving his hands. His bald head was glistening with sweat. "Rudy." Trump spun around. "I want you to go on all the airwaves and explain that we're not just fighting for me. We're fighting for America. For the truth. For the integrity of the electoral process." Giuliani picked up, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "Yes. And add that without me America will fall into communism. That should be the main line." Rudy nodded vigorously, taking out his phone to start calling familiar journalists. Meanwhile, the public relations advisor, Jason Miller, was already feverishly typing something on Twitter on behalf of Trump. "What are you writing there?" Donald thundered, approaching him. "The big fraud. America, let's not let this happen." Trump leaned over, thought, and added. "Add also, we will never give up. We will win." Miller quickly typed. Done, Mr. President. Trump smiled. Great. Now, let's talk about Pence. Everyone in the room's eyes were focused intently on him. He betrayed us. He should have just done what I told him. But instead he chose to be a weakling. I want people to know that he's the traitor-in-chief. Do you understand me? Several of the advisors exchanged glances. This was already a dangerous game. Donald, Giuliani began. No, Donald. I'm your commander-in-chief. Trump slammed the table again. Silence. Only the sound of phones and the muffled voices of his advisors, who were already beginning to coordinate his orders. Outside the window, the screams of protesters could be heard. The country was already boiling. But that wasn't enough for Trump. This is just the beginning. The silence in the room grew even more tense. Some nervously rubbed their temples, some stared at their phones, pretending to be busy. But everyone knew, Trump was just warming up. I need pressure. Fire. He clenched his fist and pointed it forward, as if giving the order to attack. I want all my supporters to know, we are not giving up. They need to be afraid. They need to know that America belongs to me. Donald, Giuliani tried to interject again, but Trump was already moving on. I want a rally. Big one. In front of the White House. Call it something powerful, something like March for America. No, better, Stop the Theft. Miller quickly typed it on his phone, sending it to the social media team. And Pence, Trump stopped in the middle of the room, his eyes narrowing. He's going to let us down again. I know it. So I want people to know that he betrayed them. That he's on the enemy's side. Let them feel it. Damn it, Meadows muttered. What? Trump glared at him. This is dangerous, Donald. This could lead to... What? People taking action? People showing force? That's perfect. Trump rubbed his hands together excitedly. Suddenly the door opened and a national security advisor cautiously walked in. Mr. President, the situation is getting worse. There's already a lot of calls for action on social media. People believe their country has been stolen. Trump smiled to himself. Perfect. Some groups, well, they're discussing more active methods of struggle, if you know what I mean. Great. Let them show force. I said, we need chaos. Let this country know what it means to betray me. The room froze. Everyone understood that what was happening now was beyond political struggle. This was no longer just protests or lawsuits. This was something more. Trump looked at his watch. So, when is our rally? January 6th, Mr. President. Great. Let's make it unforgettable. January 6th was approaching, and Trump's campaign was working at full capacity. Conversations, calls, and urgent meetings were taking place in every corner of the White House. Everyone understood, Trump didn't just want to fight, he wanted revenge. The evening before the storm. On January 5th, Trump convened another closed-door meeting at the White House. The atmosphere was charged, as if before a storm. Tomorrow is our day, he said, leaning on the table. His eyes were burning. I want this to be a climax. Our people have to show that they are not going to sit idly by while their future is stolen. We have already mobilized everyone on social media, Mr. President, Miller confirmed, nodding. Not enough. Trump turned sharply to Giuliani. Rudy, you have to give them a signal. A speech that will ignite their hearts. I want them to understand, this is their last chance to save the country. Oh, don't worry, Donald, Giuliani wiped the sweat from his forehead, I will tell them that this is a battle. That the judgment of God is needed. Great. Donald, Meadows interrupted nervously, we have inside information that some radical groups are looking to do something, well, extreme. We could lose control. Trump stopped, looked at Meadows carefully. They just love their country. Meadows paused, bewildered. And if they can get Pence to do the right thing, maybe it won't be all in vain. Silence. Someone coughed. Someone checked their phone. The main thing is for them to know, I'm with them. I'll be with them tomorrow. The advisors looked at each other. This meant that Trump would personally address the crowd. I'll tell them we're going to the Capitol. Together. Donald, Meadows's voice trembled, what if, well, if this gets out of hand? Trump smiled. It'll be spectacular. The next day. On the morning of January 6th, a huge crowd gathered outside the White House. People chanted, held flags, shouted, "Stop the theft," and waited for their leader. In the White House, Trump stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. He knew that his most important speech was ahead. Well, let's put on a show for them. Morning of January 6th, the show begins. Trump took the stage before the crowd, flashing his trademark smile. He was supported by a sea of people, thousands of supporters in red and white, "Make America Great Again" hats. Some waved American flags, others held "Stop the Steal" signs, and the most ardent were already shouting, "Hang Mike Pence." The wind lifted his tie as he took a deep breath and began to speak. We will never give up. We will never admit defeat. That doesn't happen in a democracy. The crowd roared. People chanted his name. I know you're all here because you care about our country. They want to steal our victory. They want to destroy everything we've done together. But we're not going to let them do that. Applause. Someone threw a red cap in the air, as if in celebration. And what should we do? Fight, the crowd roared. Trump nodded. Yes. And we're going to the Capitol. I'm going with you. We're going to go there peacefully, but proudly. And we're going to remind the weak Republicans who's boss. A loud roar filled the square. The people were getting excited. They were ready to go. Somewhere in the crowd, Giuliani whispered in someone's ear. The judgment of God is near. As the chaos erupted outside, Trump returned to the White House. He didn't leave with the crowd. He simply stood in front of the television screen, where cameras were broadcasting his supporters marching to the Capitol. Look at them. They're beautiful. Mark Meadows moved closer to him. Donald, they're breaking down the barricades. They're breaking in. Trump smiled. Well, they're fighting. They're attacking the police. They love their country. They're kicking down the Senate. They want the truth. A public relations advisor ran up. Mr. President, you need to call them out. Everyone says you should intervene. Trump shrugged. Why? They're doing what they have to. They want justice to prevail. But, Rudy, what's on Twitter? Giuliani quickly scrolled through the feed. Everyone's in shock. Politicians are hiding. Your supporters are breaking into offices. Trump leaned forward. Write a tweet. These people are special. They love their country. What? Meadows shouted. Right. And put a heart. When it was all over. Late at night, when the protesters had already begun to disperse, Trump sat in a dark office, drinking a Diet Coke and staring at the TV screen. CNN showed footage of the chaos, broken windows, stolen documents, papers scattered on the floor. In the Senate chamber stood a man with a Confederate flag. Trump smiled and shook his head. I get it, love of country. Sirens were wailing outside the window. America was burning. But he didn't care. Tomorrow would be a new day. And a new battle.